Hello, and welcome to Bookends, the show for teens who love to read. My name is Jordan, and I am a senior at Fort Collins High School. And today, I am here with author Donna Cooner, who's going to tell us a little bit about her writing process and her book. I'm here with also two other people who are going to be asking Donna some questions, and so I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Jessie. I'm a sophomore at Fossil Ridge High School, and I've been in the IRS for 4 or 5 years.
And we're going to actually tell what the IRS is
Yes.
right now.
Right. I'm Diane Tuccillo, and I'm one of the 2 teen services librarians at the Poudre River Public Library District. And I am the lucky librarian who gets to advise the Interesting Reader Society. I really love working with the teens that belong to that group. They read and review books, they work on projects for the library, and they get to go to conferences and do all kinds of fun things. So I'm happy to be here today with one of their other projects, doing bookend shows.
Teens, not taxes. That's what we like to say.
Teens, not taxes, exactly.
And Donna, I'll let you say something.
Well, my name is Donna Cooner, and I am a professor at Colorado State University, and I'm the director of the teacher education program there. So most of the time in my regular day life, I teach teachers and principals. But this year I had a very exciting opportunity to publish my debut novel, Skinny, from Scholastic. And a wonderful, exciting year, and I'm very happy to be here and share it with you today.
Well, I know that I myself have a ton of questions, and I'm sure everyone else does. So if you guys would like to ask some questions, we'll just get this going.
All right. I really enjoyed reading Skinny, and I was really especially interested in the fact that it addresses the issue of self-esteem in teenagers. There's been many books written about that issue through the years. One of the more recent books is called Wonder by R.A. Palacio. Another book I can think of, Sharon Flake's book, The Skin I'm In. And this fits in that whole genre of books that help teens to understand themselves a little bit better and to address issues of self-esteem. So I'm wondering a little bit about that. Why are those books important for teens, and why did you decide to write this particular book?
Well, one of the things that I think is in the news a lot right now is bullying among teens, and how that's a really difficult issue. But I think one of our biggest bullies is ourselves. We tend to be the worst critic and the worst bully that we can possibly be to ourselves. And this story is really about a girl who wants to be a singer more than anything else, but she's so self-conscious about her weight and her body image that she makes up this person in her head that is so critical of everything she does and says. And she even gives that voice a name, and that name is Skinny. And that voice continues to tell her how fat she is, how ugly she is, how she can't do anything. And so this really book deals with the topic of trying to overcome your own self-doubt and your own self-image. And that's where the title Skinny came from.
Right.
Well, myself, of course, being a teenager, and I love this book because it has such a real connection with like her ideas about what she should look like. And I don't know, that's one reason that I love this book so much. It's so incredibly believable. I know that you have, this is your debut novel, but I was wondering, have you written a lot of other things, or tell us about some of the other stuff you write?
I started writing children's books about 15 years ago, and I wrote mostly picture books because at that time I was teaching kindergarten age group, and so I wrote picture books, and I actually wrote television shows for Barney's and Friends, the old purple dinosaur guy. And yeah, so it was very fun, and I had actually never watched the show until I started writing the television shows for Barney and Friends, and that was very fun. And then I really got more involved in writing for publication in the academic world, and writing for tenure at a university, and writing journal articles and writing research articles. And I left children's publishing for quite a while I was working on that, and this is my first attempt to sort of come back to it. And I decided at that point that I knew I wasn't going to write a picture book. I had a different story to tell, and I was very interested in the young adult world at that point, and so that's where Skinny came from.
It's fantastic.
Okay, I know this is cliched, but what inspired you to write? Because I really am curious.
Well, Skinny is such a personal story because I struggled my whole life with obesity, and right now in the press, there's so much about young people and struggling with weight issues and how they're working to overcome some of those issues. gastric bypass is a very controversial way of dealing with obesity issues, both with adults and especially with teenagers. But it's becoming more and more of a possibility for people to consider. And I myself went through gastric bypass 10 years ago, and it was very successful for me. I chose the weight of 302 pounds forever in the book, because that's the exact weight that I was when I went into surgery 10 years ago. And I certainly understand the issues that Ever went through, because it was a lifelong battle with me. I lost over 100 pounds in a year, very much like Ever does in her journey. And so that story was something that I felt like was unique to my journey, and it was something that I wanted to share with others. But I also didn't want it to be necessarily my story, so I wanted to see what would happen if I set it in a fictional world and with fictional characters. So that's where the idea came from.
Cool. Amazing. Yeah. For those who have not read Skinny, would you please give kind of a little bit of an outline of what this book is really about? I guess you kind of already have done that.
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit more in that it's set in a small town in Texas, where I grew up in a Texas town, and so that also is very close to my heart. The girl is, the main character is 15 years old. She weighs 302 pounds when the book starts, and she's struggling with her own self-image and those voices of doubt in her head. She is her own worst enemy. And this isn't really a book about other people teasing her or bullying her, although certainly I've had my experiences with that. This is really about how you can be your own worst enemy and sort of do that to yourself. And that's what I wanted to tell.
I thought it was interesting as she was losing the weight, and as she got toward the end of the story, the self-talk, the negative self-talk was still there. And even though she looked good now, and she was, her hair was being changed, and her makeup, and people were starting to notice that she looked different and complimenting her, the negative self-talk still kept coming to her, and until she could really overcome that herself. Mm-hmm. She couldn't become the new person that she needed to be, and I just thought that was really interesting how you developed that story and brought her to that ending in the story.
And that's probably the most important part of the story to me, is that we can change our body, we can work to be healthier, but that changing our mind is one of the more difficult things, I think, than anything else. The actual idea for Skinny came probably at one of my most embarrassing moments. I was at graduation at CSU. I was sitting up on the stage, and my chair broke, and I fell onto the stage.
Just like
you can
story.
Remember that there's an incident in the story that was sort of a turning point forever when that happened. And if you've been in Moby Gym or Moby Arena, you know that it goes up to the heights of the stadium, and everybody's gasping at the person on the stage. And at that moment, I realized it really didn't matter who I was, where I'd come from, what I looked like. In that moment, I was a 13-year-old girl with a voice in my head that was saying, oh my gosh, look at the fat woman on the floor in the middle of the stage. And I realized that voice was so powerful. It was still with me, no matter where I'd come from or what I'd done. And that's when I started brainstorming and writing Skinny. And it just sort of came from that very incident that ended up in chapter 3, I think. It's there, definitely.
Yeah.
Are you planning on writing any sequel to Skinny or any other future works? Tell us a little bit about some of your working on now.
I'm actually working on book 2, the dreaded book 2, for a debut novelist. That's very difficult. There's a lot of expectation about trying to make a successful book 2 after book 1. It is not a sequel, but it is set in the same town. So some of the characters you will see in cameo appearances, including Ever and Rat, will be back. But it is a different story. It's about a girl who wants more than anything to be famous, but she becomes famous for a very tragic reason and then has to deal with fame in sort of this internet reality show kind of world. So it doesn't have a title yet. So we're still looking at that. So if anybody
I'm
has
already
ideas.
so excited.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. Wow.
And there may be a sequel for Skinny in the works. We're still keeping our fingers crossed
I
for
love
that.
how you kept the universe. That's such a unique thing that that's so amazing. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you couldn't be an author, well, like what career would you pick?
Well, that's kind of easy for me because I've always been a teacher, and I've always taught young children, even my master's and graduate students. It's still my classroom. It's still about teaching. And so whether or not I would write or not, and I have always written ever since I was very little, so those two sort of meld in my mind. I don't think they're inseparable at all. And so if I weren't writing, I would be teaching, definitely.
Great.
You just said that you've been writing since you were very little. Would you tell us about like some of your very, very early work?
I won a prize in 3rd grade for a Father's Day contest for the newsletter, for the newspaper in town, but I also had a whole drawer full of stories written on purple paper, I remember, and even in middle school, whenever you had a choice of a project, I would always do some kind of a creative writing activity. I remember trying to write a Civil War romance novel in like 8th grade, and I was always writing. I was always writing stories and always writing poetry from ever since I can remember. So
It's fantastic.
yeah.
Okay, what do you wish was different about your book?
That's a hard question because I'm lucky enough, I think, to say that this came out so close to exactly what I wanted. I don't really wish it was different in any way. The one thing that maybe I would do on looking back on it is spend a little bit more time explaining the background of setting up a teenager sort of for gastric bypass surgery, the counseling that might go into it, the working with therapists and working with, sorry, I blubbed that, but I'll keep talking about it. I would talk about, I would spend more time in the book helping the main character get ready for gastric bypass surgery with more counseling about what that might entail afterwards and about the mental sort of journey they would go through. I think it's realistic that with young gastric bypass patients, they're going to be spending a lot more time on the counseling aspect than they do necessarily with adult. And so I think that would be one thing I might add in.
Yeah, it's really tough, like thinking about what kind of changes you would make because you're like, I made so many.
Right.
So I completely get that.
Yes.
Okay, this is a very hard question. Okay, what are some of your favorite authors?
I was such a reader, but I read a lot. I was a huge fan of Judy Blume, C.S. Lewis, all range of types of authors growing up. And then I basically skipped the young adult world and went straight to adult world at that time. Now there's this fantastic young adult world brewing, and there's fantastic books to read that adults are actually going down and reading young adult books instead of skipping over that genre. So now I love people like Sarah Zarr and David Levithan and a new writer that's in my writing group, Veronica Rossi. Just some fantastic new writers that are on the horizon that I think are making the whole world of young adult very exciting.
Very cool. Okay, would you mind telling us a little bit about like your writing methods, like what time you write during the day, or who do you let read your work or stuff like that?
I do have a full-time job, which makes it a bit challenging, and it's a busy job because I am an administrator at the university and I do teach 12 months out of the year usually, and so it's a hectic world. So most of the time I've been in the habit of squeezing writing in anytime I can. So a lot of time I'll start my day at the coffee shop here in Old Town, and I'll write for an hour or so and then go into the office. I'll often end my day trying to squeeze in something at the end of the day. I try to take Saturdays and Sundays and at least spend part of the time. When I'm in the throes of edits, I remember I'll just break down and I'll just be like, it's like I have homework all the time. But it does feel like that sometimes, as though there's always something that needs to be written. There's always something that needs to be edited, and you're constantly trying to squeeze it in around the rest of your life. So that's pretty much the way I do it. There's no habit to it as far as every day. It's whenever I can find the time.
Okay, so what was like the hardest part of writing your book? Like writing blocks or?
Definitely writing blocks. I'm easily distracted by social media. That was one aspect of the writing, the publication part that I didn't really anticipate was they want you to talk about your book on social media, they want you to connect on social media, but you can get addicted to it very quickly. And so it was something that was quite a challenge. It was one of the most difficult things. The other most difficult thing was also not anticipated, and that was the personal stories that have come from publishing this book. People have contacted me, everything from 50-year-old women to 12-year-old children or young people, and they've talked about their very, very personal stories about weight and self-image and how they feel about themselves. And I didn't anticipate that ability to just send an email to an author and tell them something that was just so personal. And a lot of times I'm not sure how to respond other than I hear you, I'm touched, I want to, thank you for sharing. It's courageous for you to share this story. But you can't fix all these stories that are out there. And so it's amazing that the book has brought that about, that they feel connected to the characters and they want to reach out and share their stories. But it was definitely something that was harder than I thought it would be.
It was all serious. I was going to ask kind of a goofy question. Do you have any funny publishing stories that went along with getting this book out or writing the book or anything like that?
I do have one story. I was so excited about getting the cover, and I was actually at a conference in Houston sitting at a table listening to someone, and I got the email under the table, and I was waiting for it, so I was so excited to download my cover, and I downloaded the picture, and I love the graphic image on the cover, and I love the way Skinny goes into the face, but of course immediately you look for your name on the cover. Right, and exactly. I looked for my name on the cover, and it was misspelled. It was Donna Cooner. So I often have people say Connor instead of Cooner, but I never anticipated anybody to say Dooner. So I was like, oh no. So I immediately sent an email, and they fixed it, so everything was fine, but that was one of the things that went wrong along the way. So
that should be your pen name.
That should be my pen name. Actually, a lot of my writer friends call me Dooner now as joke in my writing group because they love that story.
I really like this cover a lot.
So
I think it's you can almost hear the voices when you're looking at the picture.
Should say Dooner.
Yeah.
Dooner.
I will say that at our library district, it is a popular book. We have had holds on it. We have it as an audiobook download as well, and we have holds on that. So it seems to be a pretty successful book. It's very exciting for you, I'm sure.
One of the things that was unusual was getting to listen to the tryouts for the audiobook.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually was able to, they looked at several different actresses to portray Ever and read the book. And we had a debate about, did we want them to have a Texas accent, or did we want them to play the role of Skinny really well? Those were kind of the two things we were considering, because Skinny is actually a character in the book, but it is in her head, so it had to be in the same sort of voice.
Right.
And so that was challenging, and I actually love the person they selected. She did a fantastic job reading and was my first choice, so I was very excited about that.
That's great.
How did you come up with like the title? Did you just know, or was it like trial and error?
Well, titles are so charged with a lot of the publicity around the book that often authors don't have the final say-so in their title, or it may change several times. But Skinny was unusual in that when I first started drafting that very first chapter that I described a little while ago, Skinny was the first and only title that I ever gave it. And it was the title that they went with, and it is the title of the UK version, which just came out yesterday in the UK, so that was very exciting. Awesome, often they change it in other countries as well, depending on their particular market. But I think the word skinny is so polarizing, and it has so much meaning to so many people in different ways that I think it does bring about that sort of image that I really wanted people to see when they looked at the book, and it captures their attention. So I'm glad that it kept the title that I clicked.
Is it going to be coming out in paperback?
It will be coming out in paperback, I think next fall. But it's also picked up by Scholastic Book Club, so it's in all their book clubs in schools. Great. And it's in their middle school book club and in their high school book club as well. So that's also getting it out there in a bit of a different version, because the book club version is paper as well. So.
Very cool. Obviously, you live in Fort Collins now. Where did you live? Obviously in Texas too, but other places did you live before coming here?
I've only lived in Texas and Colorado.
Oh, well, that was kind of a question.
I grew up in Texas and lived there most of my life. I just moved to Colorado probably 15 years ago. So Texas is where I consider to be home, and that's part of why the book is set there. And also I love that small town atmosphere, and Fort Collins actually is very similar to the size of the town where I grew up and where I lived, and so that's part of what attracted me to live here as well.
Oh, that's really cool. I was about to be, what made you want to move to Colorado?
All right, like what were some of the challenges you had, like trying to get this book published, and I don't know.
Good question.
Publishing a novel, a young adult novel or any kind of novel, is quite challenging. I actually had written 2 complete books before this one, and this one I read at a critique group session in a conference, and there were about 12 people around the table with an agent, and you read your first few pages out loud and they critique them in front of everyone. And so I had just started writing Skinny. I took it to this conference and I read it out loud. And by the time I got down the escalator after the session, the agent had already texted me and said, I want to see this when it's done.
Oh, that's amazing.
So
Cool.
I was like, I only had about 30 pages written on it. It wasn't finished, but that was a great incentive to actually finish the novel.
Sure it was. Wow.
And I knew I had something with this one that perhaps I didn't have in that opening of the other 2 that I'd written. The other 2 were great learning experience on how to just put a book together and how to persevere till the end. But this one I think was by far the best opportunity I had to actually get it published.
It's really cool. Aside from getting distracted by social media and writing and working, what other kind of activities do you like to do?
Well, I love all the Colorado typical activities, the hiking, the outside, the reading as well inside, doing a lot of activities like that. I do have dogs. I have 2 Labrador retrievers. Roxanne is my goat dog, who is featured in Skinny, and Cassidy is my older dog. And then I also have a cat, Stu, who is going to be featured in the new book. So Stu gets his starring role coming up in the new book. But Roxanne is the star of Skinny. So that's fun to always sort of include your pets and pull into your real life.
They're the best part.
The details. So.
All right, my last question is, what was your favorite part of writing the book?
My favorite part of writing the book was really the connection that it made with others who read it. I think when you're in this state, like Ever is, where you're so caught up in your own head, and this is where I've been before, you think you're the only one. You're the only one that has a weight problem, or you're the only one that struggles with their self-esteem, or you're the only one that feels like they're ugly or not attractive. And I think writing this book helped me connect to others in ways that not only did I realize I wasn't the only one that felt that way, but others were able to share their stories of how it helped them realize that there were other people that had some of those same feelings. So it's definitely my favorite part of the book. I love autographing. That's a realistic, fun thing to do. I love having an autographing line. I love all that stuff. But really it's about when someone reads it and it touches them in some way that I didn't anticipate. That makes me feel great.
I'm sure. I'm sorry, it just stopped. I'm going to keep going. This is a lot like your favorite author question. I was wondering, what is like some of your favorite books? Because it sounds very similar, but there are some differences, and I was just curious about that.
One of them that came, let me think for just a minute here. I was just, sorry.
You're going to have fun editing this, guys.
I'm kind of blanking on that one right now. I've just finished reading How to Save a Life by Sarah Zarr. I Love Every Day by David Levithan, but I mentioned both those authors. I love Lauren Oliver's Before I Fall. I love the sort of teenage angst of that. I love adult books as well, like Janet Ivanovich, just the humor part. I love mysteries, and I love thrillers. So all different kinds of books, really.
Kind of like all of us, right?
It's the beauty of this group.
I was interested in knowing a little more about, it sounds like this is a very personal book, and I'm wondering about the singing part. Are you a good singer? And do you enjoy singing? And you brought that in.
Thank you for asking that, because that is one thing that I love, the Broadway music that's in this book, and I'm a huge fan of the songs that are listed in the book on the playlist, and they're actually on my website as well. So if you want to go listen to the songs of Skinny, they're there. But I did sing. I sang in choirs, and I sang, but in musicals growing up and in schools. But I was always in the chorus. I was always in the background, and I was always wondering what it would be like to have that kind of talent, to really be on the middle of the stage and to sing like that. It was always something that was a dream talent of mine. So that's the fantastic thing about being a writer, is you can give yourself any kind of talent you want. You can research it, you can live it through that character. And that's exactly what I did with the singing in this particular book, is Ever was very much like me. And then I also wanted to give her something that was magical and something I wished I had that is an incredible talent.
I know all of us can relate because we all like to sing too.
Yeah, that's so great. I don't believe I have any more questions. Do you guys have any more?
No, not that I can think of.
I asked what I would like to ask.
Well, I can't even tell how amazing and fun this afternoon has been. Thank you so much, Donna Cooner, for being here. And thank you for watching Bookends.